an instructional video by Jace Consulting Group. In this segment, we're going to go over AT&T Ask Me questions. You'll find these questions on any SMOP that you get approved from AT&T, and you'll also find them in the AT&T Ask Me training, which you're required to have to work on AT&T sites. So question number 1, do you have proper and appropriate building access, permission to the environment that you're about to enter, right? So it's just asking you, do you have permission to be where you're at? And in most cases, on most sites you do, but in some cases like buildings or water tanks or municipalities, you might need special access to get to be on that site. And if you're on that site and you haven't received permission to be on there, you could get in a lot of trouble. Some of these things are controlled by states and governments, and we just want to make sure that you have the right permissions to be on there. You can always check with your construction manager for those permissions. Do you know why you're doing the work, or do I know why I'm doing this work, right? So when you're on site, if you're the foreman, if you're the person in charge, if you're doing cutovers, you're shutting technologies down, you're affecting services. Those services are used for AT&T, customers to make phone calls, but they're also used for 911, emergency services, these types of things. Those are really important to have, good, to know why you're doing the work and what is the purpose of the work that you're doing, and that you understand your scope of work and why you're performing it. Have I identified, notified everybody, customers, internal groups who will be directly affected by this work, right? So you never know who's around you. Sometimes we have AT&T towers or equipment that's directly servicing an AT&T call center that's nearby, and you might have to notify them before you shut things off. They might, in some cases, I've seen temporary towers be put up so that service can still be given to the people who depend on it near that tower. So make sure that you've reached out, that everybody in the line has been contacted, right? Can I prevent or control service interruptions, right? In any case that you can prevent a service interruption, you want to do so, right? So instead of turning all the technologies in your DC6 squid off in order to swap out your DC trunk, maybe you install the DC trunk on an open bay in another squid, and then move each power over individually, so you're only shutting one radio off at a time, right? And so on and so forth. These types of solutions, innovative solutions that think outside the box, that's what we're going to use to prevent and control service interruptions, right? Can I slide something over and keep it on air while I install my new stuff and then cut it over so that the gap in interruption is much smaller? These are the kind of innovative tools that AT&T wants us to use in order to reduce service interruptions and keep their network up as long and as intact as possible during our builds. Is this the right time to do the work? Maybe we should be doing the work at night. Maybe there's some emergency going on locally that we don't know about, that we need to factor into whether or not we're supposed to be shutting work off. A lot of times there's big events, Bike Week in Daytona or Mardi Gras in Louisiana. We shouldn't be shutting services off during those big events, because that will be major service impacting and lots of people will be affected, right? So we need to ask ourselves, is it the right time to do this? Am I trained and qualified to do the work? You should be trained and qualified to do the AT&T work. If you're not, you need to get with your construction manager and say, hey, I'm not trained to do this. What are we being asked to do on the scope of work? Maybe you don't have the expertise to change out a 6630 or do a power plant swap, and you're being asked to do it. If that's the case, then for sure you need to make sure that you're trained to do the work that they're asking you to do. And if you're not, you should bring that up. Question number 7, have I considered all the installation and maintenance requirements that apply to this procedure, right? You should be reviewing your scope of work. You should be looking at, those things. You can review your technical manuals. You can review the MOPs that you have. If you don't have MOPs for your site, you can always reach out to your construction manager and ask for them, and they should be able to provide them to you upon your request. But they should also be on site. There's manufacturer's technical documents that you can use to see how mounts are installed and how mods are installed and all that stuff. But you should review those documents and you should require them to be on your site when you're building, right? So make sure that you're looking at your maintenance requirements and installing the stuff according to the MOPS and the technical publications that have been issued by AT&T for the work that you're doing. Are the work orders, JSAs, MOPS, and supporting documents detailed, current, error-free, and appropriately approved? Right? This is 100 times over. We're always talking about JSAs and MOPS and documents. Is everything the way that it's supposed to be? Have you compared your RFDS to your CD, to your structural analysis, to the scope of work you were given from your company? Have you compared all those documents? Do they match? Right? If they don't match, then you need to bring that up and solve any discrepancies, make sure that they're error-free, right? Have you filled out your JSA for the day? Has it been approved by your first-line supervisor, your construction manager, or so on? Rigging plan. Do you have your rigging plan approved? These are the kinds of things that AT&T wants you to think about before you start doing work, right? And do I have everything I need to quickly back out or restore service if something goes wrong? Or do I know who to call in the event of something going wrong, right? If I'm in the middle of a mount swap and, all of a sudden I can't do the mount swap, whatever the case may be, right? Do you have the ability to back out of that mount swap and reinstall things back on the tower, right? That's why we shouldn't do things like cut up our mount before we actually get the new mount on the tower and everything back on air, or do anything like that, because we never know what's going to happen and we cannot have prolonged service interruptions, right? So make sure that you have steps in place to back out of your work and put things back on air if needed. Have I walked through and do I understand the procedure, right? You should be planning your site build from start to finish with you and your top hand and your technicians on site to make sure that you understand what procedures you're going to go through and step by step how they're going to play out and when you're going to have things back on air. And then you walk through that process before you actually get it. In the SMOP, you have something called a dry run. Some sites require a dry run to make sure everything's going to go up and down and do the right stuff. So have you done the walkthrough? Have you planned out your build properly? That's the last step number 10 in the Ask Me process. So that's the AT&T Ask Me questions right there, 1 through 10. And it's very important, or ask yourself, they call it, but very important that you run through steps 1 through 10. You ask yourself those questions before you start your AT&T job, and that will help ensure that you are actually ready to do the work that you're being asked to do.